Muhammad with National Network View. On tonight's show, our guest commentators, Sister Malaika Phoenix Ali Muhammad, artist, energy healer, and wellness facilitator, and Sister Teresa Muhammad, traditional birth worker, birth keeper, will discuss the controversies over recent comments made by hip hop artist The Baby. Later in the show, Sister Malaika Muhammad and Sister Teresa Muhammad will discuss claims that Johnson & Johnson targeted Black women with their talcum powder. Lastly on the show, our guests will discuss the family of Henrietta Lacks filing a lawsuit against Big Pharma. Before we get into the top news, let's do a recap of the current events we've recently covered. On yesterday's I Have a Testimony show, NNV news anchor Willie Muhammad's guest was student minister Verban Muhammad of Monroe, Louisiana, who discussed his work as a student minister, being elected to several public offices, and recently becoming a member of Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity graduate. He also spoke about the history of the Nation of Islam in that city, where the temple of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad was attacked, and one of his ministers was beaten and almost killed. Decades later, being present to watch the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan receive a key to the city, and how the minister has personally impacted his life.
Brother Vervin, you've talked about the history of the Nation of Islam in Monroe, Louisiana. Now, can you share with us, with our audience, how you became introduced to the teachings and eventually joined?
Yes, sir, Brother Will. Before I say that, I wanted to mention, I forgot to mention, the actual bow tie was produced out of the lynching that Brother Minister Biard went through.
Wow.
Elijah Muhammad said that from now on we are going to begin to wear the bow tie, especially the ones that, with the clip. So that was birthed out of that situation, that ordeal.
Wow.
But Brother Minister, I was introduced to the teachings while a student at Southern University. My roommate at the time, when I was a freshman, would always play the minister. He wasn't a Muslim or a registered Muslim, so to speak, but he always played the minister. At the time, it was cassette tapes. And I would always ask him, who is that man?
NNV news anchor Rosalind Parks spoke with weekly contributor Brian E. Muhammad, Final Call News staff writer, about Israel's inordinate influence on the world stage, their interference in the affairs of other governments, and their political pressure campaigns.
In May, the African Union condemned Israeli attacks on Palestinians in the Gaza Strip and Al-Aqsa Mosque and the evictions that took place in Sheikh Jarrah. Why has the AU now granted Israel observer status?
Well, they've been lobbying, Israel have been lobbying to get status at the AU for a number of years. And they have been rejected because of strong pushback from leaders such as South African President Ramaphosa, and others who rejected their presence based on the principled position in support of the Palestinian cause that Israel, obviously has not moved to rectify in now 73 years.
As Israel accused Iran of a recent bombing, questions remain regarding Israeli involvement in numerous assassinations of Iranian nuclear scientists and officials.
A number of Iranian nuclear scientists have been assassinated. We've been talking about the bombings of the Palestinians for the last couple of weeks. Has Israel been implicated in those assassinations?
Yes, Sister Rosalind, they've been blamed and they took credit the former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on a few occasions have alluded to what they did. Just a couple of months ago, the former head of the intelligence apparatus, the notorious intelligence apparatus of Israel, Mossad, said in an interview that they did this, you know, that they were the culprits behind this.
As Israeli President Isaac Herzog called a boycott of Israel a new kind of terrorism designed to hurt Israel's economy, Ben & Jerry's ice cream company has said its boycott is following their social mission.
The owners of Ben & Jerry ice cream Jewish?
Of Ben & Jerry's are Jewish.
Damn.
You know, Ben Cohen and Jerry, forget his last name, but Green, oh, I won't mess up his name, but yeah, they're Jewish. The founders are, but the company is now owned by Unilever, which is a $61 billion a year food conglomerate based in England. And, you know, and I also want to say on that, continuing on that last point that we was talking about, that to show you the hypocrisy, all the way around, I'm talking about America, Israel, Ben & Jerry's, you know, Unilever CEO made it very clear that his commitment is to continue to do business in the state of Israel.
Weekly contributor Dr. Akili Muhammad updated us on the COVID pandemic and the Delta variant that are surging in America and all around the world.
Now, the CDC suggested that vaccinated people didn't have to wear masks in public gatherings, and they've now reversed that suggestion. What's your interpretation of this move?
Yeah, to me, my interpretation is that it's another example of how confused these people are. They say one thing, and then within they're saying something opposite because they know how to handle this. The minister took the criteria in July 2020. Scientists from heaven cannot deal with the pandemic from heaven. And we're being shown this over and over and over again. There are certain faces that all of us know what they are. They're going to be posted in all these different news sites, and they're going to say something. And then not too long after, people have lost complete confidence because it's over and over and over again that these people are saying one thing and coming back and doing something.
Brother Shahid Muhammad, the math doctor and Asiatic Minds math instructor, discussed student achievement and proficiency in mathematics and how Asiatic Minds is preparing to help students improve their math skills and abilities.
Why is achievement and proficiency in mathematics so low in America's public schools, especially for Black people?
Well, the American public school system was never set up for the masses to be literate in any of the subjects, let alone mathematics. Those in power, the rich, bloodsuckers of the poor, they desire to stay in power. So they have to make sure the masses are dumbed down and illiterate in terms of reading and mathematics. So the school system was never set up for the betterment in mathematics. And then the American society, if we look at today, particularly, is a society with a lifestyle full of distractions, sport and play, people just seeking pleasure, savagery, and all those things go totally against excelling in mathematics.
I was joined by guest commentators, Student Regional Minister Dr. Abdul Halim Muhammad and Sister Deborah Muhammad of NOI's Ministry of Education for a discussion on the impact of COVID and its Delta variant surge on the Black community. With the Delta variant posing a serious threat, how can we expect this new strand to impact our community? specifically after witnessing the medical neglect that the Black community faced last year during the first wave?
Well, that is exactly the problem. The problem is the lack of diversity in the medical field, particularly in this administration, and the lack of equitable treatment in terms of there are two medical systems, one for the rich and Caucasians, and the other for the poor and people of color and even Caucasians. So the real problem is the comorbidity. See, they're often reporting, well, this amount of people died from the virus, but they very rarely talk about what were the comorbidities. How many of those people were obese? How many of those people lacked vitamin D? How many of those people had suffered from diabetes or cardiovascular problems?
I also posed questions to Dr. Abdul Halim Muhammad and Sister Deborah Muhammad about issues surrounding the vaccine mandate and whether it's violated our rights. With all the underlying preconditions that we discussed earlier that are affecting the world, especially the Black community, and these preconditions are what? Heart disease, diabetes, asthma, and cancer. We have never, ever witnessed the U.S. government works this hard to solve any of those problems. Why is there so much focus on this vaccination?
Well, the Honorable Minister Farrakhan has been telling us for a very long time that there has been a plan by those who are in power to control the population of the world. And so the reason being is because this is part of this master plan, this scheme that this cabal of people have to control the population of the planet. And so that's why they're working so hard. That's the overall reason why they're working that hard. It's because they want to control the population of people that they consider to be useless eaters. And so that is one of the reasons among many.
Dr. Halim Muhammad and Sister Deborah shared their thoughts about the ending of the Center for Disease Control and Prevention eviction moratorium. So, just a year after the initial start of the pandemic, where millions were furloughed and laid off, and many, by the way, have not yet recovered from this, will now potentially be facing evictions as a federal eviction moratorium has now expired as of July 31st. Dr. Halim, what does this mean for the Black people in America?
It is a crisis. We're already suffering disproportionately from homelessness. And at a recent community roundtable that we had here in Houston, the Justice of the Peace and also the constable who serves these evictions in our community both spoke at the roundtable. And they were deeply concerned that, in fact, Congress had not passed an extension of this moratorium. So now those vested interests, such as landlords, mortgage companies, and banks, are going to have their way.
On I Have a Testimony show, NMV news anchor Willie Muhammad's guest was student minister Aman Muhammad of Mosque 34 in Durham, North Carolina, who shared his experiences and memories growing up, how reading the Holy Quran ignited his interest in Islam.
In the interview, you spoke about how your reading of the Quran ignited your interest in Islam. And, so how did you come about, like, who put the first Quran in your hand, and how did it impact you?
Yes, well, at that time, it wasn't as many Black bookstores and things of that nature at that time. And so I used the library a lot for whatever I wanted to do and research. And so I would go back and forth, trying to get little dabs of wisdom here and there and whenever I could. And at the time when I was in the 12th grade in 1990, my girlfriend at that time, she was going to NC State in Raleigh, and she was studying as well, and she gifted me my first Holy Quran. And man, when I got it, when I got into that book, man, I couldn't put it down.
Let us pause for announcements from our sponsors. Coming up, our guests will talk about rapper DaBaby being removed from various performances due to his controversial remarks. We'll be right back.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Your support helps us to highlight solutions for a brighter tomorrow. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.
Asiatic Minds, online education, helping our children to discover their God-given skills, gifts, talents, and passion that will allow them to see their greatness, as well as the greatness of our people, and upon discovering that greatness, infusing them with the desire to use it for the betterment of themselves, their families, our people, and the world. Call now, 502-219-4848.
This is Sister Sajda Muhammad. We are proud to announce that the Sajda House commemorative Elijah coins are finally here. This priceless heirloom, made from recycled copper from the messenger's home, is now available at sajdahouse.com.
The hashtag Bank Black social media campaign made strides not only in revolutionizing how we bank, but also how we think. The movement inspired thousands of African Americans across the country to transfer or deposit millions of dollars into Black-owned banks. These are banks that will invest in urban communities, employ African Americans, support Black businesses, and inspire Black home ownership. This is a very proud moment for our culture as we are taking small, but significant, steps towards building Black power through Black wealth.
Thank you for tuning in to NNV News. Please share your thoughts with us in the comments section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel, National Network View. This is Clifton Muhammad with nnvnews.com.
Hip-hop artist DaBaby recent comments made at the Rolling Loud Festival in Miami, Florida, led to controversy and revealed cancel culture at its finest. Joining us for this discussion is Sister Malaika Muhammad and Sister Teresa Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum, sisters.
Wa alaikum salam.
I'm so excited to have you all today. So let's get into it. All right. So last week we witnessed cancel culture, right, at its finest. Do you all think that these cancellations from these festivals and events were necessary? Sister Malaika, can you start us off?
I don't think it was necessary at all. I think last week, the controversy with DaBaby is a prime example of how cancel culture has gotten totally out of control. And I think we need to be very, very careful about how we think about these types of things, because it's proof of a further pulling back of our rights of freedom of speech. And although it's very, very popular nowadays to speak out against people with particular sexual preferences and things of that nature, I think it's extremely important that we be very careful about heralding and cheering on this type of cancel culture. It really is becoming a serious problem. And I don't think that what he said, although it might have been offensive to some or even vulgar to others, I don't think it warranted the level of attack that came against him. I mean, I've heard way worse happening in the media. So he said way worse. It's just really interesting how, and I don't think that what he said was a direct blow to the LGBTQ community. And that is very, very concerning, because now anything you say, if anybody of any community finds it offensive or is triggered, I think that's a better word, or is triggered by your choice of language or words, that all of a sudden you can be canceled. Yeah, totally out of line.
Right. Sister Teresa, what are your thoughts of this? Are these cancellations necessary?
I guess both sides, yes and no. They are not necessary on the surface, because what he said was not necessarily offensive. But like Sister Malaika just said, much of what he says is more offensive than this current thing that he did say. And the cancel culture is a real thing, which is why I think that it was necessary, so that people can be outraged by it, because you're not going to really respond unless things like this continue to happen to make it change. So the people who don't necessarily disagree with what he said or not offended by it have the opportunity to step up and say something about why cancel culture is a thing, and to the point of why we're having this type of conversation right now.
Right. And another thing, right? So we've had many people who have said that these festivals are picky, right, regarding what they believe is cancellation worthy, especially regarding topics that are typically discussed in hip hop music or rap culture. What are your thoughts on this? Is there a double standard applied to the baby, since what he said is so-called homophobic, Sister Malaika?
Yeah, it definitely is a double standard. But I think bigger than the double standard, well, what's behind this double standard that I think as Black people we really need to pay attention to is the value of ownership. When you have ownership or you have a stake in an industry as influential as the music industry, you do have the ability or the privilege to decide what you want to allow on your platforms. And unfortunately, as Black people in America, we don't have that type of ownership or leverage in these industries. I mean, we work in them, we are the artists, but when it comes to ownership, we don't have that type of leverage. So, of course, the things that are offensive to our community, violence, misogyny, the mistreatment of women, those things that are very prevalent themes throughout the baby's music and throughout the music industry as a whole, because we don't have ownership in that industry, we don't have the opportunity or the leverage to speak out against those things, and not necessarily cancel artists who do that, but to have a platform to really influence what it is that's going out over the airways that's speaking negatively against our community. So I think that, that's the real issue. It's all about ownership. And if we don't have a seat at the table, or better yet, if we don't own the table, if we didn't build the table and own the room that the table is in, then we will find ourselves on this side of controversy all the time.
Right. And we know, right, the baby's music has a lot of violence and a lot of derogatory wording towards women. What are your thoughts on this, Sister Teresa? Is this a double standard? Is this right?
It absolutely is a double standard. Like Sister Malaika said again, who is in ownership is clear, because there are things that I see that I find offensive, but no one says anything about those things on a high level to where it makes any type of change. There's no cancel culture when it talks about women out of their names. There's no cancel culture when it comes down to people talking about drugs and violence and music that's offensive to my ear. I don't want to listen to certain things on the radio with my children in the car. And sometimes, you turn it on and you can't help but hear it as soon as it comes on. So I have a problem with that, but there's no platform that comes to cancel those type of things. So it's a double standard on who actually is in ownership of what comes out. And the double standard is we're going to do what we want to do, what we find popular, what we feel as though is supposed to be trending. And if anybody opposes that, then we're going to cancel you.
And interesting enough, right? I don't know if you all were watching this play out. So a couple weeks ago, we witnessed the baby and Megan Thee Stallion fall out, right, over the baby choosing to record a record with her alleged shooter, right? But yet no one was in outrage about this. All of these festivals still allowed this rapper to participate, to make his money. No one seemed to care that a real Black woman was shot by this man, and he brought him on the stage at Rolling Loud. And that, ironically, was not even part of the discussion. So do we see this being a part of the larger conversation around what is considered acceptable within Black culture and rap culture, Sister Malaika?
Yes, it definitely is. It is an example of what is happening when we look at what culture is. Most times when we talk about culture, we talk about arts and entertainment, we talk about music and those types of things. But when you really get into the etymology of the word and you look at the definition of the word culture, culture is insight into the mind, the intelligence, and the mindset, the thinking of a people. And so what we're seeing happening is the canceling of culture or the canceling of certain thought processes. They don't want negative thinking or negative thoughts about the LGBTQ community. But as Sister Teresa said, in modern day culture today, it's perfectly okay to have negative thoughts about women, to have violent thoughts and those sorts of things. So culture is so much bigger than just arts and entertainment. Culture really is insight into how we think, what our thought process is, and it is a display of what's really happening in the underbelly of society. And so it's really important that we recognize what it is that we're seeing and to say, how am I contributing to this? What can I do personally to create a shift? Because this mindset, this collective mindset that you're seeing displayed in culture, each and every one of us contribute to it. So the first step is to say, what do I need? What do I need? Let me check my own thinking, right? Let me check my own thinking and see how I can personally shift so that the collective thought process and the collective culture can shift as well.
Right. And I think, as you said, the undertone of this is that ultimately the Black woman is low on the totem pole if this is a real person that has been physically harmed by weapons, right? And there's no real outrage about this. And we've seen in this situation that the Black community has stood by with the LGBTQ plus community in taking the baby down. But where were they, right, when this was happening to Megan Thee Stallion? What are your thoughts about this, Sister Teresa?
I think that's very valid. But I also think that there's a lot more that have to come to the table of around the conversations. We need to be talking about a lot more in terms of hip hop and the hip hop culture, Black culture. There's so many things on the table that we look at things in a right or wrong, not as that's wrong, and that's wrong, that's right, pointing things out and calling them out as they actually are, and not using, if I view this as being wrong, then I have to view that as being right. And that's not necessarily what it is. It's all wrong. When we look at hip hop as a culture, all of it is wrong. And we all have to step up to the plate and change the dynamic of what we're listening to, what we're putting out, because like Sister Malaika said, it is our voices that is being exposed. It's how we're viewed around the world through our culture. And it has to change, whether it's Megan Thee Stallion and Tory Lanez, whether it's the baby, whether it's R. Kelly, whoever it is, whatever it is, in the way that it is today, it all needs to come to the table and be addressed.
Right. Thank you so much, Sister Teresa. Thank you so much, sisters. Let's pause for announcements from our sponsors. When we return, our guests will comment on Johnson & Johnson being sued for allegedly targeting Black women with a product that was found to cause cancer. We'll be right back.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.
worldwide, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Download the Final Call Radio app and take us everywhere. On your phone, on your computer, on your tablet, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also log on to finalcall.com and click the Listen Live button, or finalcallradio.com. Final Call Radio, the official voice of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam.
Please share your thoughts with us in the comment section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel at National Network View. I am Anissa Muhammad with NNVnews.com.
A lawsuit has been filed alleging that Johnson & Johnson specifically targeted Black women in our communities with toxic, dangerous talcum products. Welcoming us back are our guests, Sister Malaika and Sister Teresa, to discuss this important topic. Welcome back, sisters.
Thank
So
you.
let's get into this, right? Because this isn't new news. Right? We've all been hearing about this over the last 3 decades, I believe. Why are these commercials still subliminally targeting Blacks with subliminal messages? And why, among talc safety worries, is Johnson & Johnson aiming ads at minorities, overweight women with significantly increased risk of ovarian cancer? Sister Malaika?
You know, this subject is a very touchy one, because so many of us have grown up with these products, and it's an emotional connection. Our family memories and moments are all wrapped up into this particular issue with Johnson & Johnson and the prevalent use of it in our society. I mean, nobody would, no one is, people are shocked, and like you said, we've been hearing about this for decades, but it's something that's still very, very shocking. But I think it's important to really begin to ask the question, why are we as Black people, Black women, targeted by in the commercial and industrial industry? Why are we targeted? Why are we always the advertising and marketing reception? Why are companies marketing to us? And we have to begin to take an assessment about ourselves and say, why are we always the ones that people are targeting? And, I think it's really important to consider and to just think about economically that we are large consumers. We've always been, even with low income, below income Black women. We are the ones that are shopping for our families, and we consume. And a lot of times we consume without consideration. And when these companies tune into this, it's a jackpot. It's an opportunity for them to make money. And that's what people are in business for, to make money. And I think it also points to the fact that there is a general disposition about Black people based on the history of this country that we are not looked at with high regard. And so when you see that you have a group of people who shop without consideration, who don't research, who are shop emotionally, and there's an undercurrent in this entire society that you don't have high regard, you're not going to do your due diligence to make sure that you're giving this group of people the quality of products that any human being would deserve, which is a product that's not going to kill them or cause disease. But I think, the important thing for us as Black people as a takeaway is that we can't control what other people do, but we can take a look at ourselves and say, how do I need to shift in order to not be on the victim end of someone else's ill thinking towards me, my community, just because someone else does not have a high regard for you, by that. by that lack of regard. And I'm always from the school of solutions and what can we do? Because I can't control what anybody else does. We can't control how anyone in the society views us, but we don't have to constantly be victimized by other people's irregard. And so it's a horrible situation. So many of us grew up with these products, but and I think that there should be retribution for harm caused. But at the end of the day, it will be another company and another company and another company unless we begin to look at ourselves and say, what do I need to do different? How do I need to shift in order to not constantly be victimized by the irregard of others?
Right. And I like that you mentioned that towards the end, that it'll just be another company and another company, because for one, there used to be a time where we didn't see our faces on these ads, right, in any of these campaigns. But now we're seeing all of these campaigns shifting towards us. And a lot of these companies are the ones that we know are not really giving us their best end of their products. Sister Teresa, so tell me, what are your thoughts? Why are so many dangerous products being placed specifically in our communities that they know are toxic and dangerous to our health?
Well, I think that number one, the fact that we are always the target for the worst products is one aspect. But the other part is that we're the trendsetters. Anything that comes into the Black community, period, women tend to be the mass consumers in the Black community. Single mothers dominate, in our homes. So, but we also the trendsetters. So when you put something in front of us, if we like it for any reason and we market it and we start wearing it, everybody wants to wear it. And it doesn't matter the color that you are. Everyone follows what we do. And that's just the way that it's been, and that's the way that it is. The question should be, really, I think it's interesting the fact that they even deny that they do target the Black community with these products. They say that they don't, and that it's absurd when you research it. And I think that part is absurd, that when you talk about such a company as Johnson & Johnson to say that they don't, when every single company, the majority of their money goes toward marketing. They specifically have classes on marketing and talk about your target audience as one of the first things that you learn in marketing. So to even deny the fact that they're doing that is really what is absurd. But why they do it is because you put anything in our hands and we make it into something more. We will make you some money.
Right. And a lot of us kind of have seen both sides of the story, right? Where there are some people who are saying that, well, Johnson & Johnson are just selling a product that had a defect. But on the other end, is it true that Johnson & Johnson are probably targeting our reproductive organs in terms of Black women? Or is it just so happen that these negative things that's in their product is targeting our reproductive organs? Sister Teresa?
Good question. I think I'm not quite sure of what the intention was, but I do know that in science, they tend to put out a product and then later on in research find that there's problems with it. But the money is so good that they choose the profit over life. And not that it was the initial intention for that to be, for it to cause issues in women, Black women specifically. I just honestly believe that once it did come out, like with many researches that have been done, that now we're going to hide it. Now we're going to tuck it under and not expose it because we have to make the money over human life.
Right. I actually really agree with you on that, Sister Teresa, which brings, right, a different question to the table, which is once they find out, right, that these chemicals in this product are negative, how is it possible that they can keep pushing this product when these products have to get cleared through FDA, right? So does pharmaceutical companies, do they need more in oversight, or do they need to be held with more accountability? What is happening that it's almost like the FDA and some of these oversight companies are just letting this slide? Sister Malaika?
Yes, exactly. They're letting it slide. The reality is that the Food and Drug Administration is a business as well. And, you know, at the end of the day, Big Pharma, all of these companies that products have the ability to positively or negatively impact our health, they should be held accountable. And we expect them to be held accountable by these oversight committees. But the reality is we live in America. You know, we live in a country where human life is not the most important thing on the table. Money is. And so we have to come to understand that we have to accept this reality and recognize that the best oversight committee that we have for ourselves, our family, and our community is us. We have to be informed. We have to research. We have to ask questions, and we have to advocate for ourselves. And we have to be in a position of ownership so that we can hold these companies accountable, because we can't depend on the FDA to do that. The reality is that there are so many loopholes and things like that to get certain things passed, to get things available. For an example, with feminine hygiene products, you have a chemical in there that's used to bleach the products, but the loophole is that those chemicals are illegal for human consumption. They don't consider a woman using them for her monthly as consumption, right? Even though it may be going inside of the body. So these types of loopholes are used all throughout business, all throughout Big Pharma, all throughout the medical community. And we have to be knowledgeable enough so that we can advocate for ourselves. There is no better advocate, no better oversight committee than us. We have the autonomy, we have the sovereignty, we have the power, and we should have the ability to take action and to advocate for ourselves, because no one else is going to do that.
Right, definitely. And I think what you said is it's vital, because ultimately we have to take accountability for this. So whenever we are establishing our own companies, what are some lessons that we can take from these experiences after witnessing Johnson & Johnson and many other companies fail in this regard? Sister Teresa?
I think owning up to, what the science shows after, discovering more. And I think also a part of it is not being able to have a stake. If you're an oversight, if you're the person that's supposed to be monitoring, you should not be able to have any type of monetary gain from that company, which is something that is major why a lot of the oversight gets, not necessarily overlooked, but purposely just allowed through, because the same people, or it may not be the actual person who's doing the oversight, but their spouse or their child is sitting on the board somewhere, and they have family discussions behind the scene where they still all profit from it. So I think that's one major lesson that we have to learn in our own business practices, is to not use a play on words, or not to use the loopholes like Sister Malaika was talking about when we're doing our business, and just to be transparent really with everything, because it's not always about being found out as having a bad product or something that doesn't work, but it's always about how we are resilient and how we come back from things like that, and being able to have a good reputation.
Thank you so much, Sister Teresa and Sister Malaika. So let's pause for our announcements from our sponsors. After the break, our contributors will share their thoughts on the family of Henrietta Lacks suing pharmaceutical companies for usage of her cells. We'll be right back.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Your support helps to combat false media. Cash App NNV News.
Asiatic Minds, online education, helping our children to discover their God-given skills, gifts, talents, and passion that will allow them to see their greatness as well as the greatness of our people. And upon discovering that greatness, infusing them with the desire to use it for the betterment of themselves, their families, our people, and the world. Classes begin September 1st. To enroll, visit AsiaticMinds.com.
This is Sister Sajda Muhammad. We are proud to announce that the Sajda House commemorative Elijah coins are finally here. This priceless heirloom, made from recycled copper from the messenger's home, is now available at sajdahouse.com.
Greetings from National Network View. This week's Final Call cover story headline reads, "Separate and Be Saved. America's race problems and deadly race interactions are growing worse. It is time we leave the children of our former slave masters and 400-year-old tormentors. Separation from whites is the only and best solution to this problem, a serious problem that is rooted in prophecy." This FCN Volume Number 41 edition middle page article by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is entitled, "A Case for Separation." To read more, subscribe to FinalCallDigital.com and tune in to the all-new Final Call Radio. This is the NNVnews.com Final Call Cover Report.
Please make sure you leave your comments and questions in the comment section below. Follow us on Facebook, National Network View, and make sure to check us out on Twitter as well, National Network View. This is Sergio Gutierrez with National Network View, signing off.
Attorney Ben Crump and his family and the family of Henrietta Lacks have filed a lawsuit claiming that her HeLa cells have been monetized by big pharmaceutical companies. Joining us again are Sister Malaika Muhammad and Sister Teresa Muhammad. Welcome back, sisters.
Thank you.
So, is it possible that other Blacks, in addition to Henrietta Lacks, have cells now commonly known as immortal gene lines that have an amazing property? Sister Malaika.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. As we know from the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, that the Black man is the original man. So our cells are these immortal cells. That is who we are. So absolutely, I have no doubt. I mean, you hear these sorts of things all the time, not only Henrietta Lacks, but you hear about aborted fetal cells being utilized in the cosmetics industry and all this. And this is the reason why, and we all know the data or the statistics about, you know, unfortunately, this issue of abortion in our communities, but a majority of those aborted fetal cells are African American or Black women who are releasing their children. So we hear about this all the time. You know, we're wanted, we're needed to keep this society going, and whether or not they will allow it, you know, we talked about it with the debate, with the baby controversy, that we are the ones that are being utilized to have this culturally rich society. We talked about it with Johnson & Johnson. We are the ones that are being targeted for marketing and advertising to keep the economy flowing through all of these companies. And here we have with Henrietta Lacks. We are the ones that have really birthed all of this medical and technological advancement. And so I think it's absolutely fantastic that we see being victimized over and over again by Big Pharma, by commerce, by the music industry. But here you have this story of Henrietta Lacks' family, even though this happened so long ago where her initial cells were utilized, that they haven't given up the fight. And they're at this place now where they're saying, okay, I'm going to take ownership of who I am. I'm going to take ownership of, you know, my immortal gene. I'm going to accept that I am, you know, God, that I am divine, and that my body and my mind and my cells have the capacity to birth all of this genius that has come about in the medical industry. And I think it's absolutely fantastic. I hope they get everything that they deserve, which really there is nothing that they could do to repay her, to repay us for the contribution that we have given to this society. But it's a beautiful thing to see them stand up and to take ownership, and hopefully Big Pharma pays.
Yes, of course. And we recently saw that John Hawkins said that it has never sold or profited from the discovery or distribution of the HeLa cells, and they don't own the rights. So, Sister Teresa, Should the courts grant ownership of rights to the Lacks family?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because it should have never been taken in the first place, because she did not give consent. She didn't even know that it was being taken. Had she known, would she have given them the right to do so, is a question that will never be able to be answered. So her family should absolutely have ownership, as well as everybody should have ownership, and consent is definitely a hot topic, even now with vaccinations. You know, whether it's going into the body or coming out of the body, it's the same thing. Do we have consent? Are our bodies respected as our own? Is the question, and it hasn't been respected as our own, and that's been since the transatlantic slave trade. We've never been looked at as humans, or 3/4 of a human being. So that just speaks right there to the mindset behind why they felt as though and feel as though they should have any type of ownership on any part of our bodies, down to ourselves.
Right. And we know that big pharma companies have monetized off of this for decades, right? So should Henrietta Lacks' family be compensated for the billions of dollars they have made, Sister Malaika?
They should absolutely be compensated. I mean, the reality is those are her sales, but it does bring up a very, very serious issue, and we have to be willing to look at that, because this is, you know, in law they call it precedence. So if Big Pharma, if this was to go in the way of Henrietta Lacks' family, it would set a precedent that has the capacity to totally undergird the foundation of this very country, because they have profited off of the bodies of other people, profited off of the intellectual property of other people since its inception. So what happens if this precedence is set? That's like a string in a sweater that you pull it and it eventually unravels. So what we're seeing is the unraveling of this structure of the United States of America that has profited and continues to profit off of the bodies and the intellectual property of those who they believe that they own. And so I believe that they should absolutely be compensated, but we have to really understand what is being asked of them when we say compensate me for who I am, compensate me for what is rightfully mine.
Right. And it is absolutely necessary, right? So while we're on that line of thinking about Henrietta Lacks cells being used, now we know that Johns Hopkins has used a Black woman, which is Henrietta Lacks, to develop not just the polio vaccine, but for treatments for cancer, HIV and AIDS, Parkinson's disease, and an in vitro fertilization. Is the HeLa cell also being used for the COVID-19 vaccination and research, Sister Teresa?
I believe it is. I believe a lot of the, in legal terms, Sister Malaika brought up precedent. The other legal term would be, I think, discovery and everything else that comes after that. So once you do create something based on one piece of information, anything else that you create, even whether it's directly or indirectly related to that specific thing, every piece of knowledge that you gain and every thing that you do and acquire after that definitely is connected to it and should be looked at as such. And from my understanding, there are some aspects in what I've seen that have connected the COVID-19 vaccination directly to that research, specifically with the HeLa cells.
Right. And what this is bringing up now, as we continue to think about Henrietta Lacks and just the unrightfully unjust snatching of her cells, is the theft of Black people's organs a big issue now? Because we're not just thinking about the cells, we're thinking about our autonomy as a person, all the things that we come with being stolen for, research in Big Pharma. Sister Malaika?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we have to be aware that this is not something that's just isolated to Henrietta Lacks. This is happening today. It's happening with the large amount of hysterectomies that are happening in our country, the wombs of women being removed. It's happening with our children's umbilical cords, and it's happening with the placentas. It's happening every day where stem cell research is being done from these cells that are coming from us. So when you go to the hospital and you have to sign that waiver form, all of the biological matter that you leave behind, whether they take blood and there's extra of it, trust and believe they are utilizing that. So we have to be aware that it's happening every day. It's not just something that happened back then with Henrietta Lacks. This is something that's happening every day. And when we enter into their facilities and we have to sign those forms, we are actually signing over our rights to that biological matter that we leave behind.
Right. Yes. I'm glad you mentioned that, because that is absolutely true. And Sister Teresa, now, why is it that we all of a sudden found out about Henrietta Lacks through Oprah's movie? Why did we have to be educated about her through that method?
I mean, really, because our stories can only be told by us. That's the bottom line, is that we can't rely on anyone else to speak for us. We have to speak for ourselves, and we have to make our stories known, period. And in the truth of our stories. When anybody brings anything that is not the complete truth of our stories, it's up to us, whether it's in movies, whether it's in news, or in even our music. It's our obligational duty to bring our stories to the forefront in truth.
Yes, I totally agree. Sister Malaika?
Yes, I totally agree. It's up to us. We are our best advocates. If we don't advocate for ourselves, we know from history, our experience in this country, that no one will advocate for us. And so we definitely have to do our due diligence as we come into the knowledge of who we are. It's not just enough to know. We have to be willing to act on it, and we have to be willing to establish that knowledge in the world through organization, through institution, so that, the mind of God, the kingdom of God can exist on earth. So if we are saying we know who we are, we know our history, we know who we come from, then it's imperative that we do our due diligence to establish it on the earth in concrete ways, so that we can advocate for ourselves, so that we'll have those resources, and so that we can have the ownership and the leverage to actually advocate for ourselves and have the truth of who we are be expressed in our everyday lives and in our communities.
Yes, so much. Thank you so much for these responses and for such an enlightening conversation. Sister Teresa Muhammad and Sister Malaika Muhammad, thank you for joining us today. So we're going to go ahead and close out. Thank you all for joining us today and tuning in to the National Network View News. Now, please share your thoughts with us in the comment section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel, NNV News. This is Krystina Muhammad with the National Network View News. Peace and blessings.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Go to nnvnews.com/